Okay, good afternoon. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Oldham County Board of Education to order. It's July 27th, 2020. We are at the Arvin Education Center. The first item of business is to approve the agenda. Superintendent, any corrections or additions?
Yes, you do have an enclosure K on the calendar that is not in the board packet, but that is on your desk. That's based on our conversation on this last Friday. The other suggested change I would make for the agenda is to public expression up in the meeting, obviously before we take action items, and that could fall either after consent or after superintendent reports based on time. We have advertised that public expression would start somewhere around 5:30.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Motion to approve the agenda. Made by Ms. Hunley and seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. And once again, I would like to remind everybody that while we all have cooperated and have our face masks on, and I appreciate that, we are also spaced between 6 and 10 feet apart. So I invite you to take off your mask per the governor's recommendation. I'm going to invite Mr. Webb to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nice job, Mr. Webb. Superintendent, we are ready for the instructional report to the board, sir.
Okay, so tonight, I do want to acknowledge we have two guests in the building. This is Teresa Gamsky, who is our Health Department Director, and Leanne, I'm going to probably mispronounce her last name, I'm going to say Comer, which is good, I didn't go back to her high school name, is here to talk with us tonight as well as needed. They've been very actively involved in the development of our plan, and just wanted them to be here in case you all had questions of them or anyone has any questions on that matter. So we do have some updates based on what has been going on since our last meeting, and we are only going to do those updates. We're not going to repeat the same information that was provided at our last board meeting that is archived through the video footage if anybody didn't see that for the extent of time. We're going to start with Lisa Burgess and Ann Corson to talk to us about the medical piece of this.
So welcome, Ms. Corson and Ms. Burgess.
So since the last meeting, we have reviewed our plan. We've talked to officials at both KDE and the Kentucky Department for Public Health. The one major change that we had is that we had changed from checking a randomized sample of students to checking 100% of students when they enter the building. That is the recommendation of the state health department and the state Department of Education. Interestingly, as of Friday, the CDC no longer recommends screening coming into schools, so there may be another change going forward. One of the things to keep in mind is these recommendations change weekly, if not daily. Yes, within every couple days. So that was another change. The other change we had was to change the amount of time that students had to be out. It was a 14-day quarantine. The CDC changed that to a 10-day if they were tested and then were coming back. So we did change that in our guidance. The other thing we did is we expanded on the situations. I know the board wanted to have more information about what happens if a student is tested positive, or what happens if they're exposed to somebody, or what happens if they're living with somebody that tests positive. So we did add those into our guidance documents.
Ms. Corson, can I ask that you all go over those with us for the record?
Sure.
Can I ask one question on something she's already talked about?
Mr. Dodson.
Y'all mentioned about the temperature check with the CDC. Can we word it in there 100% unless CDC guidelines change, so we may not have to check it instead of having to change it every time?
Well, I think we would have to word it so that if the state changed their guidance, because even though the CDC has changed their guidance, as of today, the State Department for Public Health and the Kentucky Department of Education have not changed their guidance. Now, this guidance just came out Friday, so, we just found out, so, it may be changing in the next couple weeks, but
Well, could we put something in there based on the recommendations instead of just the 100% check?
yes, and I think we'd want to also put in some of that language with the quarantine and the isolation for return to school, because that is changing also. It's the CDC is now recommending that you're fever-free for 24 hours. The previous guidance was that you had to stay out 72 hours from when you had a fever or feeling your last symptom. So we would not want to keep kids out those extra 2 days if we didn't have to. So we would probably have to put some language in there that if the state would change their guidance to match the CDC's, we would let them come back earlier.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dodson.
So the specific situations that we have covered, and it's on, I think, page 4 and 5 of the handout that we put in there. We had already kind of put in the guidance for when a student or staff member becomes sick at school, because we thought that was kind of the most relevant for us, because we aren't going to be diagnosing kids outside of school or quarantining people, because we don't quarantine people. We just get the information. So, do you want to add anything? Am I missing anything? Okay. So one of the things that we went back and redefined is what close contact is, because a lot of the recommendations for quarantine are going to depend on whether that person was in close contact with another person. And although the health department would actually make that determination, we gave some examples. The examples they give, besides being within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or more, having personal or direct contact with someone, so hugging somebody, kissing someone, touching them, living in the same household is typically going to be considered close contact unless somehow you're already isolating from each other, or using any of the same drinking or eating utensils. That's going to be another considered close contact. And we try to distinguish that from what an exposure would be, because an exposure is not necessarily close contact. An exposure is going to be any time that you are exposed to somebody. So it could be in a whole classroom setting. It could be in a room like this. If someone in this room tested positive, that would be an exposure, but not everybody in here would have close contact. So that would determine whether you have to monitor or whether you're going to have to quarantine, and that's all going to be determined by our health department. Who's here? Yay. So we won't have to do that.
One other thing I'll add, it's also going to, a factor is also going to be wearing masks. So if everyone in the room is wearing a mask and 6 feet apart, then that's going to determine the exposure level of someone. So that might determine if a class can stay there or if we need to send some students home. And again, the health department will help us when they do contact tracing.
For clarification, because we will sometimes have times where we cannot be 6 foot apart wearing a mask, what will that look like if students are 3 feet apart, give or take, with a mask?
I think in those cases, the health department is going to look at the interaction and whether they've had sustained direct interaction or if they're just sitting and not talking. I know one of the things was that was recommended was desks all facing the same direction so that people are talking this way instead of talking in circles or talking directly to each other. So they would make that determination of whether that was a close contact or not. But it's going to depend on how the classroom is set up and how much interaction those students. So it might be just the students right around that student that tested positive. They may have to be quarantined, but if everybody's wearing masks in the whole class, it's not anticipated that the whole class would have to be quarantined or necessarily the teacher.
So I see Ms. Gamsky, I'm just for the record because people can't see a nod or can't hear a nod. Ms. Gamsky is nodding her head that you were in agreement with those statements? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so those are some of the things we went over. We also went over, what happens if students or staff have symptoms, but they don't have a definitive diagnosis. We put in there that they could, if they can be have a definitive diagnosis other than COVID, they could come back to school with a note from their doctor saying, well, we know this is allergies, they've had allergies forever, or a different diagnosis. Or the guidance on just having symptoms but no test is that you are able to come back after either 72 hours of no symptoms, which is what the current state guidance is, or 24 hours, which is what the CDC current guidance is. So we're hoping to get those people on the same page for that.
Yes.
Do you want
No,
to, anything else?
on that one.
Okay. Well, those are kind of the ones that we hit the highest because we figured those would be the most prevalent. We went over this afternoon, we went over staff concerns and when staff would be quarantined and how those leaves would be treated. And so that's in our leave document, but we're also putting together another leave document with more information just so that people can kind of plan for what kind of leave they can take and whether it be paid or unpaid, so.
Yes. So we have a nice rubric here that's attached, I'm going to call it a rubric for lack of a better term, but that's attached to your section of the report. So my question is, once we take action this evening on the reopening of school, will this be made available to our staff? Because a lot of the questions that board members are getting have to do with all of these what-ifs.
This is part of the overall reopening plan, so I anticipate that it would be available to staff once it's approved.
All right, excellent. Well, I need to make sure that that happens because we are still getting so many questions about all of these details. That's excellent. Thank you. Much work has gone into the preparation of just this section of the document. Let me ask first if board members have questions for these guys. Ms. Hundley.
I did have a question. I was just wondering, since we do have Ms. Gamsky here, I know that there's a lot of confusion in the public about contact tracing and what that looks like and what that consists of. And I was just wondering, since we do have the privilege of having her here, if maybe she could explain kind of what that looks like and what that would look like inside one of our classrooms if there was
Sure.
a positive test.
Yeah, hold that thought, Ms. Gamsky. Before we let Ms. Corson and Ms. Burgess leave us here, are there any questions for these two? Mr. Kehoe.
With the flu season coming shortly, is there any policy that has been written to separate the flu versus corona? How is that going to be dealt
Well, I
with?
mean, that's one of those cases where if you went to your doctor and you got a positive test for the flu, that could be an explanatory illness that is not COVID. So if you're a healthcare provider, you tested positive for the flu and you had flu symptoms but not COVID symptoms, they might release you back. But other than that, it's really hard to tell the difference unless you go to your provider.
A lot of the symptoms, as you see, overlap with other illnesses. So the nurses are going to have a core list of symptoms to look out for COVID, and those students' parents will be called and they will be picked up, and we'll let the physician determine whether or not it is truly a COVID or some other illness.
Thank you.
And Mr. Kehoe, once again, any student that exhibits a temperature of 100.4 or greater, did I say that correctly?
Greater than.
Sorry, greater than 100.4, we would normally request that that student be sent home anyway. So it's because, once again, we are not the ones that are going to diagnose. We would just be the ones at that point to say, sorry, your son or daughter has this temperature, they need to be picked up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. All right, thank you both very much. Ms. Gamsky, would you mind joining us, and we'll ask you to use the microphone so that our audience can also hear. And Teresa, you
Yes,
may
ma'am.
feel it's necessary to wipe the mic off. I'll let
I'll
you
stand
use
back.
that. Yeah. So I think you heard Ms. Hundley's question about contact tracing, and by the way, welcome. You're doing a great job for the county and for the district.
Thank you. Well, today, we are just over the benchmark of 500 cases. Last week, we did kind of have a surge in Oldham County, especially we're seeing a surge across the state and across the nation, especially in the southern states. I'll just give you a little context. Right now, we, within that, I think we're at 523 as of 1 o'clock this afternoon. And again, these numbers are extremely fluid. 170 inmates are within that number. 49 long-term care are also within that number. And then as of last week, we had 31 children under the age of 18 that attended several community social events. And from those events, we are investigating those specific cases. And we also have one 5-year-old that is currently hospitalized with the inflammatory process that we sometimes see with COVID in young children. So we're definitely monitoring those. And so what we do at the health department, and this has been a long-term strategy of public health, for the last 50 years, this is the strategy and the methods that we use to mitigate disease, such as, for instance, TB in our community. We have an average of about 5 cases a year of TB still in Oldham County, and so we monitor those folks. We observe them taking daily medications, so there's quite a list of state and federal regulations and laws regarding the management of TB. So in this, it's similar because it's a viral, it's airborne. We know we can get it if we're in the company of someone who is positive. What is unique about this disease compared to the flu, is what we hear a lot of comments about, is that when you have the flu, usually you're very sick and you're staying home and you have fever and you're achy and you're coughing and you have all those symptoms. You do not feel like shopping, going out to eat, and socializing. However, with this virus, we can have people that are asymptomatic, that can be out spreading the disease in our community, that are out shopping, going to school, going to work, and they're positive for that disease. So that is why this particular virus has been such a challenge for us to mitigate. But when we start a contact tracing case, of course, what we're waiting on is the lab result. We don't start a case until we have the lab. We have a lot of people call us and say, I was positive, now what do I do? But until we have that lab result, that is not official. We're continuing to see delays in lab, and that has added another challenge to our mechanism in place to keep our community safe, because if we don't have that positive lab, then that we don't have really the authority to move on and initiate that investigation. Once we do receive that positive lab, and hopefully they've been notified by their provider or wherever they have tested, that as soon as they are tested positive, or at the time they receive testing, they should start an isolation at home process. And usually what we're looking at is it's about 2 days before the onset of symptoms. Excuse me. So say if someone started feeling bad on Monday and they were at a sporting event on Saturday, we're going to look at 48 hours before the onset of symptoms. And we're going to determine within that 48 hours who were those close contacts of that positive case. So in most situations up until recently, it's been mostly family members, those close contacts you're living with. But now that we've opened up our social circles again, we're seeing that positive case may have 30 to 40 different contacts. And so we will soon, to that point of contact tracing, be scaling down our contact tracing actually, because of the number of cases that we can only investigate that main case, and we'll be encouraging them to contact anybody that they were around in close quarters. But as Ann and Lisa said, we're looking at time and space. We're looking how long were you with that person, how close were you with them, and who was wearing a mask. If both of you were wearing a mask, most likely that's going to be a low risk assessment. If one of the persons were not wearing a mask, then that would be considered a high-risk situation there. So when we're doing those contact tracing, we're calling, and most people have been extremely cooperative because they understand our purpose in doing that. First of all, is to connect them with a resource that can guide them through the process. So we're monitoring them every day, checking symptoms and fevers, that type of thing. If someone becomes suddenly ill in their family, we have clinician support where we're saying, yeah, it might be a good idea to go ahead and seek advanced care, for this situation. So we're hoping to get folks to health care a lot sooner through the process. But also what contact tracing does is it helps us study the mechanisms of how this disease is transmitting. And so we're watching these families and these groups, and what we're seeing is just like the research coming out from the CDC. Most elementary children under the age of 10 have not been proven to be super transmitters or super receivers of this virus. We think right now, for the most part, from the CDC information, is that is adults transmitting it to children. Not to mean that can't happen, because we have seen it happen, but for the most part, it's usually adults transmitting it to children. So we're constantly watching that environment. But when we're contact tracing, our goals there is to keep the extended family safe and make sure that mom and dad, or if there's a grandparent or sibling, that they're receiving our instruction of how to isolate away, when to seek care, and those type of safety net protocols, in addition to learning more about this virus, as we've learned so much just in the past 9 months, or 6 months, only seems like 9 months. Any other questions, more detail that I could answer for you?
Well, that was a great response, Ms. Gamsky. Mr. Dodson.
I got a couple of questions. Today, because of all the exposure, the governor has shut down bars, reduced restaurants, and what have you. What concerns me with school starting at the end of August is all the things that they're still going to have, like how do you contact trace the Oldham County Fair? How do we contact trace the State Fair and the Derby? I mean, all that lays back into this, and I'm having a problem understanding why they can go and they're wanting to shut down everybody else.
Right, and that's the I think the question in those type of events is, are people wearing masks? That's the only protective tool that we have at this point. And they're expecting adults that are attending those environments to have that individual responsibility for collective impact. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here in our community, is encourage the more we mask, the more we can get back to business, get back to school, get our families back to work, that the mask is the tool that we're going to need living at least in the next 6 months to a year in our future is going to be vital to get our communities up and running again.
Is anybody going to be monitoring like the Oldham County Fair and the state?
The Oldham County Fair, similar to the Kentucky State Fair, has specific guidance from the governor. When the governor adjusted his mask order on Monday, of course, those type of events or those type of entities that already had guidance specific to them, that mask order did not impact. So for instance, it didn't impact churches or restaurants because they already have their guidance in place. So that order was strictly to impact our social gathering practices, which have caused this recent surge. Did that help?
A little bit. But
There's not an easy answer, is there?
No.
There's not an
because
easy
there's so
answer.
many things going on in today's time.
Yes, sir.
I mean, all the protests with no mask and everything else, that shutting a restaurant down to 25% capacity is not going to do it. You got to get the big things. And that's not happening.
That may be a conversation that you need to have with the governor, Mr. Dodson.
Oh, I've tried.
In the meantime, Ms. Gamsky, I have a question because I have heard you really stress mask wearing. And I'd just like for you to speak for a second to the caveat which says masks are required unless social distancing can be provided. tell me what the health department, what the health department's position is on that, because we are, as you can see, we are acting on that caveat.
Well, I can say what we've been practicing in our offices. We haven't been home, working from home. We have been in our office since March 6th when the hammer dropped, and we gradually adapted those practices as they came down from the governor's office. So we have been wearing masks in our office, and we've been practicing social distancing. Every morning we have a COVID meeting, and we sit similar to this, 6 foot apart. We always have a mask on. We're not perfect in that. Everybody likes to pull them down and talk and that kind of thing, so it's never a perfect, and I can't expect classrooms are going to be perfect either. But what comes with that is just the routine of wearing that. Now that we're so many months into it, it's just natural. It's a natural course. Anytime we're out walking in the common areas, we all wear a mask. When we're in our private offices, of course, we can take them off. It does bring me pause when I think about 30 or 40 kids sitting in a large cafeteria with masks off. If you can control the talking and the not getting up and running around, I think we would be okay. But anytime you're coming up from that seat and walking into the area, then you could be putting others at risk. So it is going to be quite a adventure, I think, for teachers and adults to maintain that. But like I said, what happened in our offices, after you establish that norm, if the adults are doing it, I think the students are going to follow that leadership as well.
Right. Mr. Woosley?
Ms. Gamsky, do you feel like you have enough staff on site there at the health department to manage a big outbreak if it were to happen with the school system?
Well, we are building staff every day. The governor has allowed us additional staff. I think right now we have about 7 or 8 additional staff that have come in to help us do the contact tracing. And right now, it never feels like it's enough. If you heard my boss's message today on the governor's presser, was Dr. Stack was saying, we can't test our way out of this. We're in a surge. The virus is spreading, and we can't test our way out of it. But what we can do is we can mask our way out of it. That's the masking and the distancing are the 2 biggest tools that we have in that regard. So no, I don't ever feel like I have enough staff for any given day. Somehow we seem to always be just barely one day a step ahead of things sometimes, but just prioritizing of what that day brings. Thank you for the question, though.
I would be remiss if I didn't also stress the third component of safety, which is good hand washing.
Absolutely, thank you.
And not touching your face.
Right. Very difficult to do.
Yeah. Other questions before we let Ms. Gamsky go?
And I will just agree also with the comments made by your health team that this information is fluid. And I think the protocols are going to be fluid, and they're going to be changing as we learn more science about what we're dealing with. As we, like you say, we come into the fall, and there'll be a push this year for flu vaccine for children and, teens. Back in the H1N1 days, we came in, we actually vaccinated students. And I don't know if that will be a request this year. That would probably come from the governor's office if we choose to do that. But then also down the line, looking at a COVID vaccine as well, hopefully.
I do want to compliment you on one thing. When this first thing started, I know they closed parks and what have you. There's one church that had goals up, and 20 to 30 kids was there every day. I made a call to y'all. Within 2 days, those goals were taken down. I mean, y'all hopped right on that.
Yeah, it's been fun. Been
Yeah,
interesting.
it is.
Teresa,
Yes, ma'am.
you and your department have done an excellent job.
Yes, y'all
And
have.
we thank you for your general
Sure.
oversight of the health and well-being in the county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you prefer us to stay, Ms. Fletcher, or would you prefer us to?
I think that, I'll leave that up to you all. We
Okay.
have room, we certainly have room, and I leave that up to you
Okay,
all.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent, we need to continue with the rest of the reporting.
Yes, the other groups that have a little bit of updates is VLA. So Dr. Dylan Smith, please.
Welcome, Dr. Smith.
Hey, everyone.
This is another hot topic in the district for reopening, sir.
It is indeed. Just an update from our last conversation.
Yes, sir.
Working with Mr. Watkins, we will be able to live stream approximately 10 classrooms from the Arvin Center to students who are enrolled in the Virtual Learning Academy.
Excellent.
One thing that we are interested in doing in looking at the offering of classes, both in Edgenuity and also for courses that are career paths in Arvin, is to make sure that a student who is in one of the 4 years of the Arvin progression not fall out of that progression so they can continue to stay engaged at the Arvin Center. So Mr. Watkins and I met at the end of last week, and we looked at possible courses. There are some Arvin courses that it would not be appropriate to live stream, but we found a number of classrooms where that would be a possibility. And so we can provide you with the list of the courses that are available. Mr. Watkins also produced a document that he shared with parents who have children already enrolled in Arvin. And so we're going to make that a possibility, and we're going to learn from that streaming experience. Some of the questions that we wonder are things around infrastructure, having a set time and attendance, and we're going to learn in the first trimester how effective that is. And we can, what we learn from that, we can then also share back and look to see if it makes sense to expand that further.
Excellent.
Did you have any VLA questions for me?
I have one question, because it seems as though the other area where especially eighth grade parents and high school parents are concerned has to do with our AP class offerings. Have we made any progress in being able to add to Edgenuity or?
So Edgenuity has approximately 12 courses that are available. There are 2 AP courses here at Arvin that we've looked at the possibility, but it doesn't seem like we will have the infrastructure to expand to include those. I know I have talked with a couple of different folks about AP specifically, and right now we're just limited to what we can offer through Edgenuity. And so I don't have a good update in that area at this moment.
Thank you. Other questions for Dr. Smith? Mr. Woosley?
What would it take to get those AP classes up to be able to live stream?
So for us, what we're trying to do is take this in steps and not begin to, once you begin live streaming one space, then there's a progression where people would say, what about this course and this course? And we might get to a place where our infrastructure can't support it. And so what I could do would be to investigate it further, if that would be something that the school board is interested in. And I can come back to you with sort of the limitations that we've hit, what might be possible, and sort of what limitations exist, if you'd like.
If I could, because that's not a desire problem, that's a possible technical problem, an infrastructure problem. I think Mr. Greenwell could probably come up and talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing as a potential issue there. And once again, in all this is, we're trying to offer everything we possibly can. It's not a desire issue, it's a can we actually deliver that issue. So Mr. Greenwell, if you wouldn't mind coming up and talking about that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Greenwell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So the topic was brought up actually a couple of times throughout the summer. To be completely transparent about live streaming, we don't have enough data. It's not something that we've done before, and I don't want to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down because we don't know the experience. The best thing to compare it to was state assessment. When we started to do online testing, we did a field test with the state first to see what does it look like to the internet. After we did that field test, we realized we needed to reserve lanes of internet traffic. So we reserved about 2 of our 5 lanes of internet traffic. And as far as the internet capacity went, it didn't seem as that was a barrier for state assessment. So just taking that approach, don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, if that makes sense.
Well, somewhat, Mr. Greenwell.
Well, if I could just.
Non-IT person.
Yeah, if I could just clarify that. So the problem is that we wouldn't only be using the internet to live stream classes to students in VLA, we'd also be using it throughout the confines of the day for their students that are there using their Chromebooks, using whatever the case may be. So it's not like we're saying it's an if-or type thing. It's can the system actually support that? And then can a student's home internet support that as well? And so, once again, this is not a desired thing. This is a we are trying to figure this out thing because no one is built for this, to my knowledge. I mean, maybe a smaller district might be, I don't know. But, you know, we've been having these conversations throughout the summer trying to crack this problem. We just have not cracked it yet. We'll have a better understanding after we stream the Arvin classes. And once again, this will be an expensive year. That's not an expense I'm afraid to take on because it's for our students, but we have to make sure that it's an expense that will actually work.
And if I may add on, you asked Dr. Smith, and you kind of alluded to it as well, if say the internet pipe was a limiter and we needed more internet, unfortunately that is not within the local control of the district. That is something that the Kentucky Department of Education handles. So there would be a little bit more than just calling up somebody and saying, hey, let's can we look at this?
That's an important point for us to recognize. Thank you.
Do we have the ability to pre-record a class? The teacher comes in the morning, records a class, uploads it to YouTube for their students to then see it on demand at some point that day?
Via a technical means, yes.
So then we'll ask Dr. Smith to revisit the microphone, and maybe you can add to this discussion. Thank you, Trey.
So your question is, could teachers pre-record lessons and put them online? I think that possibility exists, but there's a number of moving parts that would go into it. Identifying teachers who are available to do that, and then all the supports that would go in, because every class is more than just watching a taped lecture. There's a lot of interaction. There is writing assignments and submitting them to be graded, getting feedback on those assignments. One of the advantages that we have using a platform like Edgenuity is that students can take assessments and get feedback that's powered by that platform. Once you have broken that out into individual teachers across a whole system, you know, certain classes could get many, many students, and that might overwhelm a teacher on, you know, coming in every morning and having huge amounts of work to grade and return to students. So some of those are just structural challenges for us. Does that make sense?
Yes. Dr. Smith, would you just continue to have conversations with
I would.
educators who are smarter than we are
Sure.
to pursue? That seems to be a real concern with
Yep.
some of our families who are trying
That
to
is true.
decide on VLA. And
Yep.
whatever the answer is, we just need to investigate it, if you would do that.
Sure.
I have one other question, and that has to do with band for
Mm-hmm.
VLA. Did we decide that is not going to be possible?
Yes.
Yes,
It
all
is
right.
not possible.
All right, just needed to clarify that. Any other questions, y'all?
One last
Mr.
one.
Loosley?
Dr. Smith, I saw I guess it was a Facebook post where we had put out a request for up to 20 teaching spots.
Yes.
Are those spots for VLA, or are your spots not going to be open for our regular teachers now?
So when we are looking at the enrollment numbers currently for the Virtual Learning Academy, we are now at around 1,100 students, and it is divided very evenly between the K-5 program and the 612 program. When we look at the K-5 program, we are trying to keep our ratio for students to teachers at around 25-1. We have had teachers that have submitted health concerns and other things, and so we're looking at the pool of teachers that could staff that K-5 program. Every one of those teachers that comes out of our school then needs to be replaced by another teacher going back into the building. And so when we look at the staffing needs for the K-5 program and the teachers who have requested or have health concerns to come out, and the teachers we would need to go back into our home schools, it's around 20 or so teachers. It's a moving number. Families have until August 7th to declare their interest in enrolling in the Virtual Learning Academy, and so we're trying to anticipate additional folks that are thinking about the choice but just haven't made the decision yet. And so rather than wait till the middle of August to try and find teachers and begin staffing schools, we put out that one frontline posting for approximately 20 teachers, and we're going to start building that pool and looking for people that could fill some of those jobs so that we're not stuck at the end of August trying to find people.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you.
and another part of that answer is that the tricky part about doing this is that you have to staff both adequately.
Correct.
And so we have to staff the Virtual Learning Academy adequately, and we have to make sure that we have teachers in buildings for face-to-face.
Yeah.
It is a quagmire, to say the least, as we've been wading through to try to figure out who can come back, who can't come back, trying to work with those individual teachers. And we've had a couple resignations today of folks that are leaving the profession or retiring or whatever. So it's that staffing, as much as we'd love it to be solid right now, it is constantly evolving. And it goes back to one reason why later tonight I'll ask for moving the school year back, is because we have holes in both spots right now. And we have been trying to hire all summer long, but some of this is, you know, when we started going down this path and we first started surveying parents, we had 2,000 parents, and that was out of about 7,000, so about half of our number that indicated that they would not be interested in coming back this year. And so that's one reason we started to go down the virtual academy path. Well, those numbers have not materialized. And so if you look at our staffing at our elementary schools, we might have 17 students of a school's fourth grade. That's not a complete class. And so we really can't take that teacher out. We have to hire the additional staff, and then it's going to be plug and play on people's skill sets and what their needs might be. We're trying to take care of our staff as much as possible, but there may be times when staff will have to make a decision based on their own health needs, because at some point, hopefully at the beginning of the year, but if not, at some point, we will be back in face-to-face instruction, and whoever is in the buildings, they need to be prepared to be able to teach face-to-face instruction. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Superintendent, additional reports during the instructional
I was just going to
session?
have Mr. Davis just come up and talk about the deadline, because it is directly related to what we just talked about as far as staffing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis.
Good evening. I did want to quickly touch on that question, Mr. Woosley, that you asked a minute ago. Were you referring to taping the classroom while students were in it or prior to?
Either.
Okay, so just to give you a heads up on if kids are in it, there are some concerns. I've been talking with Safe Schools coordinators from different districts about confidentiality issues with students who might have specific plans that would therefore be posted online for anybody to view. There are some concerns with that point, so I just want to make sure we brought that up. If students were in the building or in the classroom, the cameras would have to be very carefully placed because of confidentiality issues, and then also just things that might be, there are some students who do not, some families choose not to have their students captured video, so we would have to be very careful as well that there are a number of students who cannot legally be on video camera. So I just wanted to make sure I brought that up as well.
That's an excellent point you raised, Mr. Davis. Thank you.
The thing I wanted to come up, just to let you know, we are at about 1,200 when I left the office about an hour ago, so between Friday night, I believe the number I'd given you was 1052. So over the 3 days, we're at a little less than 1,200. I believe it was 1,190 when I walked out of the building. The important part that I know it's causing you guys probably a lot of questions too is if the board chooses to move the date back to the 24th of August, why then, I know a lot of parents have asked me too, why are we not getting more than August 7th? We feel like we would need more time than that. And while I understand and we certainly want to give as much opportunity as parents need, it is also an enormous staffing challenge. So going from the 1st to the 7th, We do believe we're providing 6 more days, but after the 7th, it will become very, very difficult for schools. I think of Oldham County High School, who has 100 staff members. They have to know exactly how many kids are in VLA. That's 17 days before the first day of school. And I know that may sound like a lot, but it is not in terms of staffing. So we will be very hard pressed on the 7th. Once that date closes, we will not be able to take any more students into VLA or move things around because we've got to get it so that we feel comfortable on the 24th going forward.
Another excellent point you make, Mr. Woosley.
If a family does sign up before the 7th, are you allowing them then to come out of it?
Yes.
And go into in-person after the 7th if they need to?
Oh, after the 7th?
Yes.
I think that gets us back into the same spot. I think if you choose, you have, for example, I said yes because I have had some people who have signed up for VLA and then they've emailed me, asked to come out. That's perfectly fine up until the 7th. Okay. But after that, I feel like if we don't hold the hard line for everyone, then we're going to get into an issue of not being able to staff appropriately and end up in an issue.
So I think now would be a great time for us to remind everyone that VLA is a semi-permanent option because we have 3 breaking points throughout the course of the year. And NTI is a very transitional situation. And so I know a lot of parents are saying, well, if you start NTI, I want to start NTI with my regular teacher, but then once school starts back in, I want to go into VLA. There is no possible way to staff that. It's just, I understand their concern, I understand their request. There is no way for us to be able to do that, whether it be logistically, monetarily, because as we staff this additional plans that we're trying to do to provide options, it's going to be very expensive. And when I say very expensive, I'm not talking hundreds of thousands, I'm talking about $1 million, and possibly more than that. And I've had those conversations in my weekly communication with board members. We're trying to do the best we can to provide the best education we can to fix a lot of people's issues that are not their fault. And this whole thing's not our fault. And so I know people will not like that answer, but I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. We can't go loosey-goosey with that date because even that date at that late, it's going to be extremely pressing to make sure we have everything in place to go.
Yes, sir. Other questions? Mr. Davis, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Superintendent, before we move on, I think those are the only committee chairs that stated that they wanted to add to their report. But since everybody is here in the room, I just want to make sure that none of our other committee chairs have anything that they would like to add or just have it put on the record. All right, we'll move along with the agenda. Thank you, everybody. We are ready for the treasurer's report, sir.
Ms. Anderson?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon,
Ms. Anderson.
everybody. This is the year-end report for fiscal --
Yes.
This is the month of June and year-to-date June. So if we begin on page 22, we've got our cash reports. You can see that we began the month with 53, almost $54 million and ended with $44 million. If we compare that to last year, we were at $52 million, and the big difference in that, for the most part, is from the Camden Elementary renovation. We had $8 million in our cash at that time, and at this point, we have about one and a half or two. For food service, we're at 1.2 million. Last year, we were at 1.4. And daycare, we've seen a considerable drop. That went from 2.3 to 1.4. So those are the two that have really, the two proprietary funds that have really been hit by the COVID closures. On the following page is the summary of cash by each fund. And normally I don't spend too much time on here, but I would like to call your attention to one item. If you go under construction, there's a line item, capital improvements, for $9 million. And we had some savings that were in the prior two funds, capital outlay and building fund, and we have transferred those in anticipation of many of the projects that Brent has on his agenda. On the following page, we've got our usual comparison to prior years. What I am presenting to you today in these reports are what we call period 12, the 12th month. We're on a cash basis of of our governmental accounting. We are now beginning period 13, which moves us into a modified accrual basis, and we will be recording things that we don't normally record, receipts and payables that are due to us on behalf, revenues and expenses that come after this period 12. And then after that, we will be moving on to the full accrual report, which is seen in your audit report, and that just gives a different presentation for things like depreciation, capital assets, and debt. So there's a lot of work that'll be going into the next few months on the accounting side of things. So if we look at the summary on top, we've got our general fund revenue. If you follow that all the way across, we are just slightly above of what was projected for budget. We look on the salary line below, and we are also slightly above. If we kind of look at the general revenue and go down in that next section a little bit, our biggest categories are general property tax at $35 million and our SEEK program at $38 million. SEEK we can predict perfectly, so we have no variance there. But you can see that there is a shortfall between general property, from the SEEK program, last year to this year is a drop of $1.2 million. And we also, we do see an increase on the general property side is but 1.6. So we really don't feel the full impact of any change in property tax rate increases. And I think that's about all on this page. The following page is just a detail of what you guys have seen all year long. And then if we go to page 27, we've got the comparison of the salaries by category and other expenses as well. If we look at our salaries and benefits combined, we are about 84% of budget this year and about 83.5% last year. So we're seeing a slight increase there. The only other thing that I wanted to call your attention to on here is that we have received our buses. We got 6 from this year and 1 in this year, so it looks like we're over budget, but we kind of borrowed from last year. All right, let's see. Page 35 has our expenses in the functional format. I did want to let you know that this is also available on the standard income statement. It's in a slightly more summarized form, but it is available for you there as well. The following page, we have our summary of bonding potential. No change to that report. Page 38, we have our balance sheets by fund. We're doing a little bit of moving around, getting ready for the next phase of our accounting. You'll see that we've got some assets and depreciation coming in on our capital assets for both the governmental and the food service assets. And on page 51, we have our income statements. This again is period 12. When I submit the unaudited AFR report to the state, they require some additional information that was not available at the time that I prepared this, so there will be some changes to that report when it hits the state, and primarily that's going to be for the on-behalfs that are required to be presented. In the unaudited AFR section, which is the consent item, I did give you guys a little bit more information about the proprietary funds so you could see where and how they were hit. And that concludes the treasurer's report.
Questions for Ms. Anderson? All right, motion to approve the treasurer's report, please. Made by Mr. Dodson and seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? That's 5-0. Bills and claims, please.
All right, on page 105 are bills and claims. Since the last time you guys met, we've got 940 invoices, almost $10.5 million in expenses. We are up this year by $728,000, and I checked into that, and it is construction. We have 6 projects. We paid about $300,000 for each of those during that time period. So lots of June 30th bills coming through.
Construction bills.
Yes, exactly. We've also got some IT expenses that are coming through. I think Trey's finally able to order things. They're not so held up. And we're also paying for the AP exams for the high schools. And on following pages are the actual invoices that came through with some further descriptors if you need those.
Excellent. Questions, board members? All right, motion to approve bills and claims, please. Made by Mr. Woosley, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor, and that's 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. All right, board. 5 minutes. Does anybody need to roll up any windows? We get a bad storm out there, y'all. It's too late. Are we buying you a new car, Mr. Deebs? No, we're not. You've just seen the budget. All right, board members, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first are from the June 22nd regular board meeting. Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve. Motion made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor? That's 5-0. We have a second set. They were from July 14th, a special called meeting. Corrections, additions? Motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Kehoe, seconded by Ms. Hundley. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Superintendent, we are ready for your notice to the Board of Personnel actions, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. There is nothing unusual or out of the ordinary for this month. This last month was a little bit of a slow time as just some retirements come into place or resignations come into place. Obviously, the long list of appointments, and we continue to try to fill positions at this point of this year.
Excellent. Any questions or comments, board members? All right, thank you, sir. We are now ready to approve the consent agenda. Your recommendation, Superintendent?
Approve the consent items as presented in your packet.
So we have items A through a 3-part I. May I have a motion to approve, please? Motion made by Mr. Woosley and seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Superintendent, we are close to 5:30 for public expression.
I would urge that maybe at this point we interrupt the agenda and allow for public expression to come in place of the superintendent reports and then follow that with action items.
Yes, sir. So let's begin with public expression.
Okay.
Do you want me to read our?
Yes, sir.
Speakers should register by signing the sign-in sheet upon their arrival to the meeting. The board will call upon speakers in the order in which they're signed in. Speakers shall not exceed the time limit allotted by the board. The board will allocate time based on the number of individuals registered. Public criticism of individual staff members and individual board members is prohibited. Concerns about individual staff performance should be addressed with the staff member directly or his or her immediate supervisor or the board chairperson respectively. Public expression is not a question and answer period. Any questions expressed by the speaker will be noted with directives for appropriate administration for follow-up. The board, however, reserves the right to respond when appropriate or necessary.
Thank you, sir.
I think we have 10 speakers.
I think we do. So what's the pleasure of the board for a time limit?
Let me check real
3
quick
minutes?
just to make sure that number is accurate, if you do not mind.
All right.
Madam Chair, since it got dark outside, can we turn on the rest of the lights?
Sure.
If I knew where to turn them on at, I would.
Give us just a second, if you
The
would.
number we have right now is 10,
All right.
but we are missing 2, and so Mr. Williams will filter them in if they get here.
All right.
3 minutes? 3 minutes?
Miss Jane?
3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deeves.
Oh, you can see.
That was a lot of light. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Would you introduce yourself, please? I'm not sure the list is
My name's
accurate.
Amanda Hayden. I have 2 children in the Oldham County school systems.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Miss Hayden.
Ready?
When you're ready.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here tonight. I don't want to be here fighting and imploring Oldham County schools to do the right thing and follow JCPS, Fayette County, Carroll County, other Kentucky counties, and beginning our year remotely. I've been vilified. I've had my teen daughter contacted by people who don't like what I have to say. But as many times as that has happened over the past 3 weeks, I have had teachers reach out to me multiple times. Most I do not personally know. and thank me for speaking out, so I am going to continue to do so. 2 minutes, 3 minutes does not allow for everything that is wrong with VLA. To say that it's unacceptable is an understatement, especially for middle and high schoolers. I know you're hoping that enough students choose VLA so that in-person classes are safe, but this choice being offered to parents is an unfair game of poker. You're calling parents bluffs. We either accept unsafe in-person classes or we accept a substandard virtual learning academy, and neither is acceptable. An NTI program run by our children's actual teachers that have been given the time and resources to develop it is what every Oldham County student deserves until this pandemic is over. The simple fact is that you know you are unable to open schools safely right now. As Dr. Stack just said today, when people gather together, COVID spreads. Kids and staff are going to contract this virus. It will spread to the community that we all live in. You can't even keep COVID off of our sports teams this summer, which are practicing outside in small controlled groups. If you decide to hold in-person classes right now, you're accepting there will be deaths. The flawed logic argument that very few kids get sick and die from COVID, which in itself is horrifying, is often cited. But one can reasonably infer schools have been closed since March. Kids have had the least exposure to COVID. Closing schools was the one pandemic mitigation action that we took that worked. Children were the fastest and most quarantined population, and now new COVID cases and hospitalizations among children are rising across the country, and we don't know the long-term effects. All this says nothing about the safety of our staff, our teachers, our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers. My husband's 500-person place of business is not even thinking about holding in-person meetings, but hundreds of students inside of our schools is fine. I implore you, put the safety of our students, staff, and community at large first. You've closed schools before based on the forecast of snow, and I urge you once again, err on the side of caution, the side of no dead kids or staff, and begin our year with NTI. Are we ready for yearbook pages dedicated to the staff and students who died from COVID? And what is one semester, or even possibly 1 year of NTI compared to that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hayden.
I couldn't hear you as you were cleaning that up.
I am, but if you could announce it, the speaker would grab a mic and clean up their mic.
I will. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just have a couple of requests. If you'd introduce yourself, and then when you're finished, if you'd wipe off the microphone for us.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Okay. And did you say 2 minutes or 3?
3.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rebecca Gordon, and I'm a science teacher at East Oldham Middle School. I've been a veteran teacher in public schools for almost 17 years. But more importantly, I'm coming to you as a mother of 2 boys here in the district. I'm here to share with you about the worst day of my teaching career. The day I had to walk into a school building knowing that my 7th graders had to know that their fellow student had passed away. To say that it was horrific would be an understatement. We stood in the hallways, we sobbed, we held each other, and the level of trauma that took place that day is immeasurable. When you lose a student, it's equivalent to losing a child, and that child has been on my mind since we have been thinking about re-entering schools during a global pandemic, especially when we know we've already seen the spread in our own high school program athletic departments from opening just for practice. I am scared not only for my students, but for my colleagues, and I'm especially scared for my own children as the thought of going to school for hours at a time in small confined spaces. Can we open schools during a pandemic? Possibly. If you look at other nations such as Japan and Finland that have been successful in the reopening of schools, they have 2 very distinctive differences when compared to OC's plan. First, these schools had small class sizes to ensure that social distancing could occur. They implemented alternate schedules, staggered openings by age, and they excuse me, and they put need above all else. We are not there. Our class sizes are now averaging about 25 to 30 students due to low registration for VLA. Secondly, in countries that have been successful, the virus was under control, and just this past weekend, we had record numbers of COVID cases. We are not even close to being at that point of reopening schools like those other countries that were successful. We don't want to join the ranks of Israel, India, and Mexico, who simply opened too fast, too soon. So today I come to you with that student I lost not too many years ago heavy on my mind. And while I can't go back and save her, I can advocate to save the students and colleagues that walk into our hallways this year by requesting that we consider NTI or other forward-thinking ways to start school this year. And in closing, I ask the board to really ponder the question, is our quest for rushing reopening with face-to-face instruction worth losing a student or colleague? I know that this is hard, I know this is difficult, and I do not envy your position. And please know I respect each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Rissler, and I have two children that are attending Odom County High School. My daughter is going to be a junior, and my son is going to be a freshman. And my children are bright students. I have my daughter who is going to be taking JCTC. She takes AP classes, and she's in 2 gifted and talented programs. My son is in the CAPA program, which is brand new, and he is thrilled to be in, as well as taking ARVN courses. So to say that we utilize the classes here in Odom County is obvious. We love Odom County, and that's why we chose to live here. Now, looking at the 2 options, we have a really hard task in front of us as far as being parents, because we have to look at an unknown safety risk versus irreplaceable education opportunities. And while I understand that you're trying and you have a tremendous task in front of you, and it is very appreciated, I need to tell you my concerns. I do not feel VLA is comparable in any way to the traditional enrollment. The opportunities are not there. My son can't be involved in CAPA. My daughter can't be involved in her AP courses. JCTC is still at best undecided right now. And those are missed opportunities for my children as they're entering high school and exiting high school into the rest of their future, which is irreplaceable. Likewise, the unsafety of our current times and what's happening. I know that every one of us have been in a school where you see a little kid run up to someone and go, touch them, ooh, you've got cooties. You can't tell me you can't see someone slide the mask down and cough at their friends and say the same thing. I believe that will happen, and I believe it will spread. So I'm tasked right now with what do I decide. Likewise with traditional, if I choose to send my kids to school, I wrote an email to the VLA questionnaire and asked what happens if my child is entered traditionally and someone in my household is exposed or test positive and we are quarantined. And they responded that my children would receive their education through packets, so that a virtual option would not be available unless the entire district shut down and refocused through NTI. That's scary. That's not just scary for my children, but any child that struggles to have to work off packets, especially if you have a family at home that is sick. I don't think that that's acceptable, and I do think that we should model after other counties and other states that are approaching this with a more cautious approach, that are using a program like NTI so that they can build forward and they can adapt with their teachers. I think it's unfair to ask a teacher who's a classroom of in-student kids then to provide supplemental information for the sick kids at home. That's double the work for our teachers, and they are already doing a tremendous job in front of a pandemic. I mean, they're heroes. So I appreciate your time here. Thank you for letting me speak. I want you to know that every one of you is respected, and we love our community here. But as a mom, I have to tell you what's in my heart. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Ms. Rissler, before you leave, microphone. It may be Mr. Rissler is following you, but nevertheless, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys again for hearing us. I really do appreciate it. Both me and my entire family does. Just to give you an idea about what kind of, oh, Chris Rissler, sorry.
Okay.
I have 2 kids in Oldham County Schools.
Thank you, sir.
Just to give you an idea of what our family has done with this pandemic. I've got my father, he's old and he hits every high-risk category that there is. And he told me at the start of this thing when we found out how serious it was, he has no expectation to survive this if he gets it. He's told me and my sister that flat out, and we don't either. We have no reason to believe that. I mean, I hope the best, but he's totally prepared for that. And we've had that discussion. So I stay away from him. I haven't seen my father since earlier this year, very early this year, just as a matter of precaution. Some of the other steps we take, I've worked at home. We've stayed apart. We do the 6-foot social distancing thing. We wear masks. We've sanitized everything as much as we possibly can to stay as safe as we possibly can. And I don't consider that living in fear. I consider it living with responsibility. That's what we do. We try to keep ourselves safe. We try to keep everybody around us safe. And I think that's what we should do as a school system. It's a really hard decision, like my wife had just stated. It's a really hard decision that we've got going forward because as a parent, anybody who is a parent and anybody who has school-age kids, you know that sending your kids to school, they're going to get sick. That's what kids do. That's what they've done since time out of mind. They go to school and they bring things home. They get the flu, they get colds, they get chicken pox, they get lice and bed bugs and everything else, and they bring it home. That's just part of having school-age kids. And I honestly don't think this is going to be any different. I don't think it's fair for you guys. I've seen some things that you guys are planning to do as far as like having the kids sit in alphabetical order, which is great. I understand that in the contact tracing that you're going to try to do. But I don't think it's realistic to expect you guys to handle that and to be able to do the contact tracing when it hasn't been done in any other business, in any other county, in any other city or state in this country so far. And to expect you guys to bear the burden of that and to do it successfully is not realistic. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to work. Yeah, I'm skeptical to say the least. I think it's wrong to open schools right now, and I think it's the worst decision that's been made, and a lot of really bad decisions with this. With my kids in particular, they go to Arvin, JCTC, and Kappa, and those will not be offered through VLA from what we've been told so far. And we've talked to quite a few teachers, and they don't have the plans for reopening. That we've asked them questions about it, and because of the questions we've asked to other people, we actually have more answers for them, the teachers, than they have for us right now, which I think that's a pretty good statement to say that we're not ready to do that yet. And as far as if you look at it from a safety standpoint, just safety alone, I know we're supposed to be putting the kids' safety and health in front of everything else, and in order to do that, I don't see this as any different than a blizzard. If there was a blizzard outside, the kids would stay at home. If it's dangerous for them, they stay at home. That's just what we do. I don't see this as any different. There's a blizzard outside, and it's unsafe, and there's just no snow. But it's the same situation.
Mr. Lister, you're out of time.
Okay, sorry. I apologize. Thank you guys again.
Sorry, Mr. Rissler, feel free to continue with your remarks through emails to
Gotcha.
us, sir. And we appreciate your time. Do one thing for us. Would
Yes.
you wipe the mic off for us? Thank you, sir.
Gotcha. Again, I just want to say thank you again. I know this is unprecedented times, and I do appreciate everything you guys are doing. I know you're doing the best that you can.
I don't know where the trash can is.
They can just take it with them.
Good afternoon.
Everyone.
Would you please introduce yourself, sir, and then when you're finished, wipe the microphone
Of
off
course.
for us?
Can I bring this up a little bit?
Sure.
I'm Alex Norton. I have a second grader at Harmony Elementary, a daughter. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you and share my thoughts. I don't envy where you are. This is a hard time, and making this decision is difficult, but I want you to know that I agree with everybody else. I don't think the VLA is a viable option. It seems like there's not been planning that has gone into it in a way that is really viable as an option. I personally am dissatisfied with sending. I don't think that's safe if it can be at all avoided. And I also believe that keeping my daughter home for the VLA would hurt her academically and socially in a way. And I would propose doing an NTI program similar to what we did in the spring, ramping that up and putting resources into that with limited opening of schools for needs where kids need meals or don't have access to the individualized learning plans that would be possible through NTI. The fact that to get a decent education this year means I have to send my 7-year-old to school during a pandemic just seems reckless and absurd. I'm her dad. I'm supposed to protect her, and that's what I'm going to do. We don't know about infection rates with kids. Any studies outside of the U.S. are models, and like the previous people said, we've kept kids out of schools and rates are low, but we've seen those rates go up as activities have increased. I don't know how any 7-year-old or 18-year-old would kind of deal with friends dying due to this, and I think we should do everything we can to limit that possibility. Again, I propose a virtual learning remote option similar to NTI. I understand it's difficult with staffing for teachers, but they rose to the occasion in the spring. Talk to them, work with them in a way that makes that work. Let's not just jump to this new program that if we end up going to NTI because of state mandate, then we've put resources into something that's going to be scrapped because kids in school have to go to NTI. It seems like we're doing too many different things. As I considered, I'm going to read this part because I'll get choked up. As I considered the options presented to us, I imagined what the days would look like if we put our daughter's education first and chose in-person instruction. Each day helping my daughter put her mask on, telling her not to get close to her friends or her teacher, not to touch her face, not to be scared or worry that she could get the sickness that we've been talking about for the last 5 months, and taking extraordinary measures to avoid, and sending her off to face the world alone. I imagined looking her in the eye and sending her off, trying to ensure and encourage her to be brave, knowing inside that it is not safe and it is not okay for a 7-year-old to have to face this disease we know so little about. I ask you to look me in my eye and tell me that it'll be okay. Can you look me in the eye and tell me that she'll be safe, that you've done everything possible to limit the risk of infection for students, teachers, staff, and the community at large? And I believe under the current plan, you cannot do that. I urge you to ensure the learning of all and provide an NTI-style option that is tied to students' home schools rather than the VLA for the health, safety, and education of everyone here in Oldham County for the 2021 school year. When we work together, we can solve the problems our school system is facing. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Norton.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If you will introduce yourself and then wipe the mic off for us when we're finished.
My name is Wendell Farah. I have 2 kids at East Oldham. You should know that my wife and I are both products of an Oldham County education. When we had children of our own, we chose to come back here to make this our home so that they had the same opportunities that we had in education. I'm here to urge you to both push back the start of school and to not utilize the Edgenuity platform as an option to having our own teachers educate our kids. As an application architect with over 30 years of experience in IT and software development, this does not seem like a viable option to having live teachers teaching our kids instead of videos. Over the last few weeks, Kentucky is seeing a significant rise in its 7-day rolling averages of infections. The state's positivity rate is now above 5%. There's no vaccine. The only known mechanisms we have to try to control this virus is a combination of social distancing and wearing masks. These are facts, not suppositions. These are not guarantees that our children will not catch the virus even by doing this. Why would we rush to reopen our in-person school programs when the infections and positivity numbers are far worse now than they were when we shut down these programs in the spring? Even if every child wears their mask successfully, how do you keep them all 6 feet apart from each other and our teachers, given the number of students in our school system and the size of our classrooms? Someone with COVID-19 can be asymptomatic for 2 to 14 days.
During this time, they can still transmit this virus. An asymptomatic student would not likely show any signs of temperature when you took their temperature upon entering the school. How are you going to keep them from transmitting this to both their classmates and their teachers? Any one-day effect is going to take right back to their families. With over 12,000 children in our school system, it is likely that at least a couple are going to be going to our schools with COVID-19. How confident are you in the measures that you are putting in place are definitively going to prevent them from spreading the virus to others? Are you confident enough to risk someone's life? It is imperative we do everything in our power to protect our children, our teachers, and our community. Please pass this extension, if only to give yourselves more time to try to study the trends in the virus and make even more preparations. The preparations need to include input from our healthcare professionals, which I know you're doing. The teaching staff is also important because they are risking their own health to educate our children. And the community of parents like myself that are entrusting our children to all of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnson, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Steve Johnson. I have 3 kids in the Oldham County Schools, 2 at North High School and 1 at one at Goshen Elementary. And I just really want to say how appreciative I am of the fact that you guys are making in-person school an option for my kids. I realize that with teachers being out of, teachers aren't seeing kids. So as a pediatrician, I'm one of the few people who is seeing tons of kids on a daily basis. And I cannot tell you what a mental health catastrophe I'm seeing day in and day out. This is checkup season, and I would say probably over half the kids I'm seeing, they're coming in with anxiety, they're coming in with depression. Probably half my day is spent seeing kids for therapy, for suicidal ideation, they're self-harming. And these were totally healthy kids, mentally healthy kids a year ago. And these are the kids whose families felt comfortable bringing them into the office. The social isolation is brutal on our kids. Kids are spending 10, 15 hours a day playing video games. Kids, all ages, are complaining. The parents are noting their sleep schedule is completely off. We have, middle school kids, high school kids, elementary school kids going to bed at 3 a.m., waking up at noon, spending all day in their room. The longer the kids are out of school, the bigger the mental health toll is going to take on these kids. I can't even keep the therapists are almost, in Louisville, are almost all full because, we're sending so many kids that direction. I'm seeing kids with COVID in my office every day. The biggest symptom, the biggest presentation is they have no symptoms. Someone on one of their teams tested positive, so they'll come in, we'll test them. They have no symptoms. They may test positive, but the biggest symptoms I've seen so far at my office are just, I've had a kid with a headache, a kid with a sore throat, and a kid with a fever. That's the extent of COVID in the pediatric population that I've seen so far. Again, I guess my point is please just keep in-person school an option for kids. It's essential for kids, both socially, emotionally, and especially their mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thank you for your long-term service on various site-based councils as well and in our schools.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
You can drop off some wipes the next time you come by. Just kidding.
We hoard them too.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
You may have to drop that microphone a little bit.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, ma'am. My name's Megan Barr. I'm a mother of a rising second grader, seventh grader, and ninth grader.
Welcome, Miss Barr.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you also for your frequent communications during this unprecedented time. Thank you for providing the option of in-person school full-time for my kids, and as well as the virtual option for those that do not feel comfortable with in-person school. My children need their lives back. The majority of their daily, weekly, monthly routines has been taken away from them, and there is an impact and a cost to that. The response to this pandemic has been disproportionate to the reality of this pandemic. 80% of those that get COVID-19 who do not have pre-existing conditions are either asymptomatic or experience cold-like symptoms. The mental impact of continued shutdown is arguably worse and more far-reaching than COVID-19. To the extent we are still able to control what happens in this county and not have those decisions dictated from Frankfurt, I am asking that you choose the well-being of our children and allow those that wish to go to school the ability to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Barr.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Did you tell us where your kids are in school, Miss Barr?
A second grader at Camden, a seventh grader at South Oldham Middle, and a ninth grader at South Oldham High.
Thank you. So, Michael, does that conclude our public expression?
The first two on the list did not make it here.
All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you. We are going to move ahead then with our agenda. Teresa, you all are still welcome to stay. I am glad you were here for public expression. Superintendent report number 1, sir.
Ms. Corson is in the house for a consider a policy revision.
Ms. Corson? Can you just touch base with us on this? I think we have one policy, don't we?
I can't remember what it was. All right.
It is.
9005
Yeah, 9005 admission.
Oh, right. We made a slight amendment to that because, why did we change that?
Well, apparently we have been getting students entering the district from unaccredited programs.
Oh, this is actually kind of prospective. This is for
Yes.
people who are
in case.
coming back from homeschools or cottage schools, things that in the past they were supposed to provide a portfolio of items. I think that was a little more well-defined in the past when other kids were keeping portfolios, other kids in school. That has kind of gone away, and we have not changed our policy. So right now, there's not a set specific test for placing these kids when they get back into schools and what grade they should be in and what, what topics they've covered. So we're proposing that that be updated to include an appropriate assessment of what grade they should come into in addition to the portfolio and attendance data.
Excellent. Any questions at this time, board members? So we'll take action on this next month. Thank you, Ms. Corson. We are ready for Superintendent Report number 2, sir.
Mr. Brent Bohannon has a construction update for you.
Welcome, Mr. Bohannon.
Thank you.
Included in your packets is the monthly construction update. I will kind of go through these pretty quick, and then if y'all have any questions,
Yes,
please
sir.
feel free to stop me, or we can answer any specific questions at the end there. The Camden Station project has reached its final closeout stages. We are finishing punch work on that, and the contractor is submitting closeout documentation on that. The central office renovations is nearing completion. We still have quite a couple of items that have longer lead times that we're waiting to have installed, but the majority of that work is in place as well. The Oldham County High School roof replacement, as we saw a couple hours ago, has continued almost on a weekly basis to be slowed down by rain, but we are making good progress on that, and the next week or so we'll kind of determine where we're going to get to a point where we have to hold up and stop before the school year starts, put things back together for kids to get back in place, depending on what the board's decision is later today, or if we can keep going for a couple weeks with that. The Buckner Classroom Edition, I did want to bring to y'all's attention. We have started the site work and got a significant amount of that complete. The building excavation is to subgrade, and some interior demolition of classroom casework has taken place to make way for Mr. Greenwell's technology upgrades in that area. I did want to point out that we do have a significant holdup in that project from the Department of Housing and Building Construction plan review process. As you can see in my report, there's a couple things that has developed a little bit more since this report was put together. So we have finally received a response back from them and are moving forward with that. The LaGrange partial roof replacement, the mechanical curbs are to be installed. They're currently being installed. 3 or 4 panels that are missing left on that will be finished up as soon as those are complete. So there shouldn't be any issue with getting that tied up here in the next week or so, weather dependent, of course. The North Middle HVAC and refrigeration replacement project, as you can see in the images there, the new cooler and freezer is installed. The grid is starting to go back into the cafeteria, and the addition roof is complete, and the chiller enclosure on the east side of the building is complete as well. There is a COVID-related hang-up on that as far as one large piece of mechanical equipment, but we hope to have that here in the next week or two. The South High Administrative Addition and Gym HVAC project, as you can see in the images included in your report there, that is moving along quite well. I will note that that project in Buckner Elementary were submitted for plan review at the exact same time, same to the day.
Wow.
East Oldham Middle School addition and preschool expansion, those projects are kind of on hold a little bit until we get some of these projects we've got active out of the way. And I think if you scroll down to some smaller projects that we got going on around the district, the North Oldham High School baseball and softball lighting is complete. We did light meter testing on that, and they are performing punch work on that. South Oldham High School turf replacement is underway. The LaGrange site improvements, including the parking lot out front and the bus loop replacement and a gate at the west side of the building there is underway as well. Are there any questions?
What do you do in your spare time?
My only question is how are you running all these projects, right? You have one assistant, is that correct, Mr. Bohannon?
Yes, ma'am. Miss Julie?
You're going to let us know when you need additional personnel?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Mr. Kehoe?
You had mentioned you're going good progress on Oldham County High School roof. Well, what percent complete do you think you are now?
There's 4 major quadrants on top of that roof. As of Friday, the last time I was up there, they had 2 of the quadrants complete up to the, call it the temporary roof. It was basically everything but the cap sheet. And then one of the third quadrants was underway. So I would say that they're probably 3/4 of the way complete with those quadrants, which makes up about 90% of the roof. So if I had to throw a number at it, I'd say about 80 right now.
If the weather was favorable, how long do you think, every day, how long do you think?
If we had they're doing about a quadrant a week in favorable weather. So,
Thank you.
of course, we haven't had a favorable weather week yet, but. Any other questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bohannon. That concludes our superintendent reports, and I think we are ready now. Let me make sure. We're ready for action item J, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So the board has heard on the 14th and then again tonight about the Oldham County Schools reopening plan. So I think I need to just say a couple things here just for clarification.
Yes, sir.
This reopening plan, as best as we possibly can, would be implemented on August 24th. That is our goal. But I would be neglectful, and I don't think any superintendent sitting in this seat at this time with three things that are hanging out there can definitely say that I would, unless we were just to recommend something like NTI all year round like right now, and I'm not suggesting that, I don't know that I can definitively guarantee anything besides the following. There are two important dates and one thing we have to consider. But this reopening plan is a solid plan for all the health and safety things whenever we're in face person. And so we've done a lot of talking about NTI and being out NTI this time, NTI out that time, whether that happens, that doesn't happen. This plan covers reopening on any time that we're back in schools. So that's really what you're approving on this particular thing. The 8/7 BLA enrollment date is very important for us. The 8/9 staffing date is very important for us. And then obviously the COVID numbers are very important to us. And so we are going to try to make the effort to open up for in-person instruction on the 24th. But there are still factors out there that would possibly change that plan. And I'm just trying to be as transparent as I possibly can that this is a solid reopening plan in so many facets. But we have to make sure that the virus is in control. We have to see what the BLA enrollment looks like and if we can pull some more numbers outside of the schools. And then we have to see what our staffing numbers look like. Those are still things that are unknown that we continue to work on every single day. So I just want to make sure when I say approve the reopening plan, that is what you're approving, is the plan to reopen whenever we are able to do so. It's our goal. We're continuing to work towards that every single day, every single minute, it seems like. But there are some things out there that we still do not have answers for, and we may not have answers for at least another week or two. And that's tied to why we asked for the extension to begin with. So with that, I would recommend that the board approve the Oldham County reopening plan.
So board members, we have had quite a bit of discussion over the reopening of schools for the 2021 school year. We have had various special called meetings. Some of you have been observing the reopening committees as they did their committee work over the last 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to ask at this time if you have any questions or comments.
I got one comment.
Mr. Dodson.
All the information we received, I think it's a very solid plan. I really do. And I want to compliment all the committees that put it together because they deserve a lot of compliments.
Yes, we cannot say that enough. And most of those committee chairmen are sitting here, and I would repeat that over and over and over. Thank you so much for your leadership during this unprecedented time in history. Other questions or comments? So Superintendent, your recommendation, sir.
Approve the reopening plan as presented.
Motion to approve, please, made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Mr. Woosley. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you, sir. We are ready for the next action item, sir.
Okay, this is the supplemental that we provided for you separately, enclosure K.
Yes.
And so Michael Williams is in the house. There are no changes, I do not believe, Michael, since Friday. There are no changes since when we last met on Friday.
So, Mr. Williams, if you would, for the sake of our listeners, Could you just address the highlights of this calendar that we're getting ready to approve, sir?
Yes, ma'am. So basically what it does is it takes the start date from the 12th of August to the 24th of August. It then also moves around some of the teacher work days. So you would have a teacher work day before students even appear. That would be right now on the 20th, and then opening day would be the 21st of August, and then we would open on the 24th to students. It does not change any breaks, major breaks that we have. Those have been approved and basically left in place. And other than it takes away the flex conference day that we had built into the calendar around presidential election day and just makes it a teacher work day. And basically we just removed that flex conference day from the system.
Thank you.
Other than that, basically everything's the same from the original calendar that we obviously approved, or that you all approved, I don't even remember when now, March? In March. And the only thing it really changes is because we're starting later, it basically puts us out later. So it would put us out I believe the 2nd of June would be the last day for students.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Are there questions, comments? So Superintendent, your recommendation, sir?
Approve the calendar as presented. Option 2?
2.
Yes. Motion to approve, please. Made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Mr. Woosley. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Great job. We have one more action item, and that would be action item L, sir.
So Ms. Anderson is in the house if you have any questions, but this is regarding the school fundraising request for the fiscal year 2021, which is this year. You know how that works.
Yes, sir. Are there questions or comments on this report, board members? Ms. Hundley.
I do have a question. Are we, as the board, are you all placing a hold on not, like I'm thinking of PTA and PTO events that, you know, happen every year. Are you all placing a hold on those for the fall semester or for the entire year? Or have you all made did I miss that? Or?
No, we have communicated that to principals that right now, it doesn't seem like this would be a wise idea to have a larger community event, which is sometimes, I know that some of our fall festivals get really, really big. And so we've asked for those to be delayed for the first semester until we can reevaluate based on what's happening with the situation that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you. Other questions? I'm going to wish our schools well with all of these ambitious fundraising events. Those funds are so important. Your recommendation, Superintendent?
Approve fundraising request for the upcoming fiscal year as submitted, and authorize the superintendent to approve on a case-by-case basis in accordance with appropriate policies and regulations any additional fundraisers.
Motion to approve, please. Made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor, and that's 5-0.
Before we move forward, Ms. Fletcher,
Yes, sir.
Can my assistant superintendent, Mr. Deves, come to the mic for a second?
Yes, sir. We always look forward to hearing from Mr. Deves.
Hey, thank you. I'll try to be really quick, but I think we need to spread a little orange. And so there's 5 ladies. Could you ask them to come here for a second?
Yay, orange frog moment.
Yeah. Carlina, why don't you come up and join them?
Welcome.
Thank
you. It's
So
a whole happy crowd.
tonight, for your dinner, we have prepared for you both hot and cold meals from the Oldham County Food Service Department to give you an idea of what students could be getting in grab-and-go meals. But more importantly, these are 5 ladies that have devoted more time. Usually only have 3 people that work summer feeding program from the time school's out. But these ladies have run, along with some other people in their staff, Carlina and Kim Campbell, have run the summer feeding program for all our students who have either driven, helped with the buses, and given them to go out and do deliveries. And they're always behind the scenes. And now that I have them here, I can brag on them and what they have done for our kids in our community. that have been underserved for so many things. They have stepped up, they put their family stuff on hold and come in and really just, they have epitomized Oldham County, Team Oldham. And I think since they were here, I would just want to say thank you from me, from the students, and I know you guys would love to see them and actually put them on camera for a second to say,
Yes, we
these
would.
ladies have rocked. On that piece of, so we have South Oldham High School with Shelley.
I was going to ask them if they would
They can come-
introduce
yeah.
themselves,
Most
Mr.
definitely.
Deves, and tell us what school you actually usually work at.
My name is Linda Key. I am manager for North Oldham Middle School and North Oldham High School.
Welcome, Ms. Key, and thank you.
I am Debbie Dunaway, and I'm the manager at Oldham County Preschool, Buckner Elementary, and Oldham Middle.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
I also
Dunaway.
do summer feeding at LaGrange every year.
Oh, awesome. Summer feeding.
My name's Shelley Ward, and I'm the manager at South Oldham High School.
Thank you, Ms. Ward.
I'm Tiffany Reardon, and I'm the manager at LaGrange.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon.
I'm Missy Ballard. I'm the manager at Harmony Elementary.
Thank you, Ms. Ballard.
And they also have support staff behind them, and we've had volunteers from teachers to administrative staff that have also helped hand out food and made that go. And we're working on a plan to make this go a little bit further into August because we had it through July. And we'll get those out to you. But tonight, everybody in this room, we have hot and cold meals for you all, and then I know during executive session as well. So I just want to say thank you again for you guys and what you've done. So.
And Carlina, thank you for your
Yes,
leadership
most definitely.
in food services. So we so greatly appreciate you all, and thank you for joining us tonight. And it's an honor to be recognized by Mr. Deves as Orange Frogs, so thank you. We're going to probably conclude the meeting in just a minute, so if you can stay tuned, or you can get my take and go ready. All right, at this time, the board needs to go into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.8101C. We will discuss the following matters: 2 litigation matters pertaining to student injuries, 1 litigation matter pertaining to a non-student injury, and 1 special education matter. The board needs to go into executive session pursuant to this KRS to discuss litigation preparation, the public disclosure of which would jeopardize the board's position. So motion to go into executive session made by Mr. Kehoe and seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you.
To the right.
On, but it's not working.
Oh, it's broken now.
I can't sing. Who am I kidding? Are you going to tell us when we're back on the 15th?
Well, I can't tell you anything different than what I told you tonight until after the 7th and after the 9th.
Okay. So we'll get some dates out.
That's on a Saturday.
Whatever the date is.
We'll come up. All right. The board has just come out of executive session. Is there any action coming out of executive session?
No action.
All right, thanks, everybody. We'll move ahead with our agenda, which only includes 1 information item. If everybody would review the monthly district energy usage report. And Superintendent, what's your recommendation?
Recommend to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, made by Ms. Hunley, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thanks, everybody.
click, do you need to click off there first?